Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In my last video, we explored the manual FBDI process. For example, how to prepare the Excel template, generate the zip file, and upload it through the schedule processing Oracle Fusion. But that was only part of the story. So in this video, we'll take it a step further. I'm going to walk you through how to build a fully automated FBDI inbound integration using Oracle Integration Cloud. We'll start from the basics. Receive the inbound file, store the data, and trigger the import job in Fusion automatically. I've already prepared the working example to demonstrate this end-to-end process, so let's get started. So in terms of integrations, we need to build at least two separate integrations. The first one is the inbound integration. It reads source data and submits it to Oracle Fusion. And the second one is a callback integration, which monitors the process and keeps track of it and handles the post-import tracking and reporting. So for inbound integration, this is a high-level description of the things that we need to do in OIC. So the first thing that we do is that we need to read and load the data source. And this can come from multiple channels. It could be from SFTP server. So if the data is coming from an SFTP server, it is typically in the form of flat files. For example, CSV files prepared according to the FBDI template. It could also be from the database. For example, Oracle Autonomous Transaction Processing, which is Oracle ADP database. In some cases, the data might be passed directly through the request payload. However, this is not recommended for large data sets because it's not scalable. The next one, the second step, involves mapping and converting the source data into the structure required by the FBDI template. So in some cases, if it's required, the additional data can be fetched from the Oracle Fusion by using the BIP reports. The purpose of this is to enrich or validate the incoming records. The third step is file preparation. We will use the stage file action in the OIC to generate those interface CSV files and the corresponding property file. A property file is nothing but a file including all the parameters for import. And then we package all the necessary files into a single zip package. And finally, this zip package will be submitted to Oracle Fusion using the bulk import mechanism. And then this will trigger all the relevant scheduled processes in Oracle Fusion applications to load and process the data. So now let's go to the working example to have a look. So the first step is to read and load the data source. Let's go to the data source. This working example is based on the AP invoice. So the assumption is that the customer can provide the data in two files. The first one is the invoice header, and the second one is the invoice lines. This is how the invoice header looks like. It's got business unit, source, the invoice number, amount, date, and supplier information, the number and the supplier site, and the invoice currency, and description of course, and then the import set, which is a unique ID, and then the legal entity. Yeah, so those fields here are taken as compulsory fields to create one AP invoice. And what about invoice lines? Let's have a look. The line number and amount and description and distribution account. Okay. So suppose those two files can be uploaded onto the SFTP server, and then we need to read those two files in OIC. So let's go to the OIC. This is my OIC integration. To make it simple, I've created only one main scope, and I've included everything here. So the first thing to do in this integration is to read the file, the AP invoice header from the server. So let's have a look. The operation is to read a file, and we need to provide the values for the directory and the file name. And there's a question, do you want to specify the structure for the contents of the file? Yes, of course. We know the structure of the file, and it is CSV. And the next step is to drop the file into this place and also provide the values for the record and record set. So what I do normally is I'll use R for the record and use RS for the record name. And if we go back to the source file, the first line is column header. So we need to check this column header. And next one, and close. So now we're able to read the data from the server. And now the next step is to create the CSV files required by Oracle. Remember last time we talked about the FBDI template. So by using the FBDI template for AP invoice, it generates two files. The one is AP invoices interface. The other one is AP invoices lines interface CSV. So now we need to generate those interface CSV files. Let's have a look at the stage file action. There's a couple of options that we can choose from, and now we choose the right file and specify the file name. This file name needs to be exactly the same as the one generated by the FBDI template. Okay, so it needs to be correct. And specify the output directory. So what is this directory? This directory is actually, it's not a real physical directory on the OIC server or file system. It is more a temporary, a virtual folder used only within the current integration execution lifetime, and it will be automatically cleaned up afterwards. So what I do is I'll use the temp, and I use concatenation as well to put the instance ID afterwards. And also specify the structure. The structure of the file, you can use the FBDI template to generate the CSV files and then drop the file into this place. But this file, it doesn't have the column header, okay? So uncheck this place. And then close. After the creation of the stage file, we need to figure out the mapping between the source date field and the interface CSV file. So what we normally do is that we refer to the CSV files generated by the FBDI Excel template, and it should always be treated as the source of truth. And then we need to identify the position of each field. How do we do this? We transpose the data in Excel from the row to the column. So let's have a look at what this means. This is a mapping. On the left hand side, this is a structure of the data field. AP invoice header, okay. On the right hand side is the structure of the interface CSV file. There are so many fields here. So the question is how to identify which is which. How do I do the mapping? So let's go back to the CSV files created by the FBDI template and open. In this file, what we can do is that we copy this row and then paste and choose this option, transpose. And now by doing this, we can know the position of each field, right? So in this file, what we can see here is that from the first field to the sixth one, we need to do the mapping and populate those fields. For the number 7, we don't need to do the mapping. And if we go back to the OIC, we can see the tag names here for those fields, C1, C2, C3. So it's actually the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, if I put it like this and compare the data here with the tag names in OIC, so by looking at the data in this way, it will be very easy for us to identify the position of those fields. Number 7, we don't do the mapping. Number 11, we don't need to do the mapping, okay? And the last field that we need to do the mapping is number 23. So number 23, we have done the mapping for this one, so this is correct, okay? You might still have one question. So when we do the mapping between the source data field and the destination, so for example, if I look at this one, I know this is business unit, okay? But when I do the mapping, it will still be very difficult for me to identify the meaning of the of a certain field in the destination. So how do we solve this problem? So what we can actually do is we go back to the template, and we open this template, and then we also open the interface CSV file generated by this template. And what we can do is we copy the column header into the CSV file, and we select the first 2 lines and do the transpose. Okay, so as we can see here, by doing this, we can tell the meaning of those fields. But there's something that we need to be aware. So the column order in the Excel template, it generally matches the column order in the generated CSV file. However, differences might occur, and especially in some templates that include hidden fields and grouped headers, or when sometimes Oracle releases updated versions. So therefore, for accurate field mappings, we need always refer to the generated CSV files. It should always be treated as the source of truth. After creating the interface CSV files, the next file that we're going to build is the property file. A property file is nothing but a file including all the parameters. So the first 3 fields here are job package name, job definition name, and the zip file prefix. And all the rest fields are parameters. So let's open it and have a look. And this is an example of the property file for payable invoices. This is the job package name, and this is the job definition, and this is the prefix for the zip package. And to get all the parameters, we need to go back to Fusion and check the job import payables invoices. We need to get all the parameters here and put them into this property file. So back to OIC. In the integration, we need to use the stage file action to build the property file. Let's have a look. The operation is to write the file, and the file name needs to follow the name convention. So the extension of this file needs to be something.properties, okay? And we need to save this file into the same place where we store the other interface CSV files. And then next. And it's going to be in the form of the CSV. Okay, so now here in this place we need to drop the file. We need to drop this property.csv file into the configuration of the stage file, and then follow the same thing. Okay. And then what we do next is to do the data mapping. In this working example, to make it easy, I used hard coding for all those parameters. But this is not recommended in reality. What I would recommend is that we create the variables and assign the values of the parameters to those variables, and then we do the data mapping. So once any of the values for the parameters is changed, instead of updating the data mapping, what we can do is that we update the values assigned to the variables. Okay? In those parameters, we can see that there are numbers, and this might be the IDs for the business unit or legal entity. So what we normally do is that we use the BIP reports to get those IDs from Fusion. So this is something that we need to do before we build the property file. So the next step is to package all those files into one single zip archive. We're going to use the stage file action to do it. So the file operation will be different. It will be zip files, and we need to provide the file name and also the directory to zip. Apart from that, we need to specify the output directory. So to distinguish the source and the output directories, I would like to save this file into a subfolder called FBDI. And then the next step, after the creation of the zip file, now we've come to the final step, which is to create the bug import. Now let me show you from scratch how to do this. Choose the connection. Bug import 2. And the three options. We need to go for the second one, which is import bug data into Oracle ERP Cloud. And now we need to find the import process that we need to use, which is import payables invoices. Import payables invoices, this one. And then continue. And then there's notification mode that we can choose. Occurrence, send notifications in any case, or when this is successful or on failure, just leave them as default. And there's an option here, enable callback, just to make sure you check this box so that we can receive the callbacks. And continue, finish. Okay, so this is done. And the next thing is do the data mapping. So in the bug import here, on the left hand side there's a file reference. On the left hand side, after the creation of the zip file, in the response, there's a file reference as well. So this is the file that we submit to Oracle ERP Cloud. We need to map them. And in the properties, on the left hand side there's a file name. We also do the mapping between the file name of the zip response and the file name in the bug import. After the submission of the bug import process, the integration is not going to wait for the completion of the bug import. It goes to the next step and then finally goes to the end of this inbound integration. For this inbound integration, what we normally do is that we configure a response message. So let me show you. Configure, please check this one. Configure this endpoint to receive the response. And then this is an example of the response message. We're going to have a status and a message. And also there's something called Fusion Request ID. So what is this Fusion Request ID? In the response message of the bug import, there's something called result. And let me try to assign this result to the variable. Okay. And remove the second bug import I created just now. Okay, and then save. And let me activate this integration. And then run this integration. Okay. And now we check the message. So obviously, the response of the bug import, it gives me an ID. So let's go to the system to have a look. So what we can find in the system is that the process ID for the job load interface file for import is 5881452, which is exactly the same as the one that we can get from the response message of the bug import. So by doing this, we can get the ID for the first job that is submitted to Oracle Fusion. And this ID will be very helpful for inbound integrations. Now let's go back to the slide. So in this video, we have covered the basics of an inbound integration. In my next video, we're going to talk about the callback integrations. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.